For Detroit Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, he is considered one of the hottest names to become an NFL head coach in the very near future. But the question that many people continue to ask is, why is he continuing to stay in Detroit and not become a head coach somewhere else? We're going to talk about the real reason as I give my opinion in this expose episode. So stay tuned, everybody.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, all Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So, here's the thing, folks. When it comes to various things in American culture, when it comes to various things in American life, there's always this want or desire to know when it comes to a secret. There's always this desire to understand if you don't really know the reason. Like, I'll say this right now. Best way I can describe it is this. When you take a look at some of the things in Americana that everybody wants to try and figure out what is the actual real reason or the real answer to, some of the biggest things I can think of is what's the real secret formula to Coca-Cola. There's other things like, hey, you know what? Is there really, aliens, Area 51 and stuff like that. The point of the matter is that there's a lot of things that we would love to know the real answer to. We would love to get a straight and honest answer to. And let's be fair and honest, to a lot of those things, we're not ever going to. But when it comes to offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, there's been a thought process that's now been starting to come around here. It's like, okay, offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, he's considered one of the best up-and-coming coaches to become a head coach in the NFL. And over the last two offseasons, this guy has been one of the hottest names. He's been one of the most heavily recruited coaches to potentially become a head coach. And yet, both straight off seasons, he has decided to not leave the Detroit Lions, to remain the offense coordinator rather than become, a head coach somewhere else, rather than become the head man. And you have to think about it. Over the last 3, now going on 4 years, the Lions have come a long, long way. And there are quite a couple of big reasons as to why they have come a long way. And you can literally go down a list of them. There's Brad Holmes' drafting, there's Dan Campbell's personality, his leadership, there's the term's resiliency. But while those things are all very important, one of the things that has allowed the Lions to become a Super Bowl contender, if you're realistically going to be honest and you're going to list a lot of those things, having Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator is definitely up there. But perhaps just as important as having Ben Johnson and having all those other things that I just mentioned is you have to talk about the relationship that Ben Johnson and Jared Goff share. And for me, this relationship is extremely important. And it's, in my opinion, a huge part of why Ben Johnson is still here. Not more so than just the fact of what we've heard from quotes. I'm talking about there is an underlying reason, there's an underlying understanding that we have to come to realistically get the truth as to why I think Ben Johnson is not wanting to leave. And again, it can't be overstated the significance that these two have had in, bringing about the change that the Lions have had over the last couple of years. It truly cannot. It can't be, because without Ben Johnson, without Jared Goff, this team is not the same. It's not even close. So for me, it's like I sat here thinking really, really hard and long about, okay, we've heard what Ben Johnson has said when asked about, hey, you know what? Why are you still here? Why did you want to remain with the Detroit Lions? And that's all fine and dandy. But for me, the type of answer that Ben Johnson gave, which we will talk about here in this episode, really prompted me to start thinking. And some people are probably going to say that maybe I'm overthinking the whole thing. Maybe I'm looking way too deep into this. But for me, it's like when people give answers, you need to realistically try and look look at the trees between the woods, or look at the woods between the trees, whichever way you want to call it. You have to look deeper to get a real understanding as to what they're trying to tell you. And it is my honest belief that the real reason why Ben Johnson hasn't left the Detroit Lions, it lies hidden within the relationship and chemistry between Jared Goff and Ben Johnson himself. And that, for me, is where we're going to start this episode. That, for me, is where we're going to take this episode. And the way I'm going to start this episode is asking this question. What if the real reason why Ben Johnson didn't leave, why he refuses to leave, is directly correlated to Jared Goff? And furthermore, to put it so much more even to a further point, what if it has something to do with the fact of the recent contract extension that Jared Goff just got? Now, that right there is a whole lot to think about. But let's take a look at the timeline here. Let's take a look at how the events that have happened, have transpired to this point, have really brought us to this moment in time. Let's go back, shall we? Let's go back to the end of 2021. So now we're in the 2022 offseason. We're going into 2022. Dan Campbell names Ben Johnson the offensive coordinator. And what happens is he develops the offense with Goff in the offseason. Now, as we all know, as the saying goes, the greatest journey, it all begins with a single step. There's multiple different variations of that quote, but that's the basic way you can put it. In the 2022 offseason, Ben Johnson and Jared Goff, they both made important decisions that would forever change everything with the Detroit Lions. First and foremost, we have to understand something here. Jared Goff was asked by Dan Campbell about what he thought about Ben Johnson becoming the offensive coordinator. According to reports, Jared Goff endorsed Ben Johnson becoming the offensive coordinator when asked by Dan Campbell. So that's important step number one. But then you have to think about this. If you go back to 2022, there was a huge article that was released the year after that in 2023. I think it was released by either The Atlantic or Sports Illustrated. I can't remember. But the point of the matter is that article was extremely in-depth and regarding the relationship, regarding the development of the Lions offense between Ben Johnson and Jared Goff. And within that article, it talked about there was a moment in the 2022 offseason where Ben Johnson had a very rare moment where he had some free time, and he was asked by Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, to go out to Vegas, get a little time to relax, not have to deal with work. But what Ben Johnson found out is that Jared Goff, the very same weekend, was also off, and what Ben Johnson decided to do was to say, I'm going to forgo going to Vegas and having some fun, and I'm going to take this time to sit down and I'm going to work with Jared Goff on figuring out this offense and building this offense with Jared Goff. That particular decision, to take that weekend to actually sit down with Jared Goff, dude, I have said it before, I will say it now, and I will say it again probably in the future as long as Ben Johnson and Jared Goff are here, which will probably be for a little while at least. That decision paid huge dividends almost immediately. Because again, you go back to that article that I'm referring to. Ben Johnson, he already had the formations and the terminology that the Detroit Lions were going to use because Dan Campbell had already given that to him. What he was trying to do with Jared Goff is he wanted to put the nuts and bolts of the offense together, and that's exactly what they did. Over the next 3 days, from Friday to Sunday, the Lions, Jared Goff and Ben Johnson, over 24 hours for those 3 days, they went through everything they wanted the Lions offense to go through. They went through everything they wanted the Lions offense to be. Day one on Friday, the Lions Jared Goff and Ben Johnson went over Goff's favorite pass run concepts that they were wanting to implement into the Lions offense from when he was back in the Rams days. In day two on Saturday, Ben Johnson was then, explained by Jared Goff the different types of Ram plays that he didn't fully understand. He didn't fully comprehend. And then on day three on Sunday, what both Jared Goff and Ben Johnson did is they brainstormed new plays to try and get more out of what Jared Goff had already mastered. They were trying to further expand upon what Jared Goff was already really, really good at. So what happened there? Those 3 days, that time not only richened and developed the two's mastery of the offense by making the offense even better, by making it a much more, honed and, complete process of what they were looking for, but it also enriched the connection of the relationship between the two men as quarterback and offensive coordinator. Now, on that time that I'm referring to, Jared Goff said of Ben Johnson, he said this specifically. He was talking about Ben Johnson being a great listener. And I've talked about this in the past, but I want to bring it up again for the point of this conversation. Jared Goff said, I know anything I say to him, and again, he's talking about Ben Johnson, will be taken pretty seriously. He really values my opinion and cares about what I'm saying. That's huge for a quarterback. I have brought this quote up before because I'm telling you this. There's a reason why human beings say stuff. There's a reason why human beings highlight certain things. My dad told me this. Behind every lie, there is a sliver of truth. Well, here's the thing. I'm not saying Jared Goff is lying here. What I'm saying is, behind this quote, there is a definite subtext that we have to understand. And the reason why I say that is because Jared Goff, as we know, had a very rocky relationship with Sean McVay. And I believe that part of that problem was because Sean McVay was not willing to listen to Jared Goff. Sean McVay decided he was going to have things ran his way, and he didn't give a damn about what Jared Goff said. Jared Goff was pretty much like, listen, hey, I would like to do this, and Sean McVay was like, listen, this is my offense, you're just going to do what I tell you to do, and that's the end of the matter. That right there does not work for a lot of people. You don't get the ability to do that with most people, and most people are going to be cool with it. Well, that's why Jared Goff said the ability for someone to listen and for them to take him seriously, that's huge for a quarterback. Well, the importance of Goff's statement was from how Johnson viewed him as a quarterback, viewed Jared Goff as a quarterback in relation to him as an offensive coordinator. And what Ben Johnson had specifically stated was that it was more about being a partnership between the two rather than being a player or a coach. Think about it. This is what Ben Johnson said. He said, that's where I think the secret sauce is. They have to believe in it. He's talking about the play calling. He's talking about the whole process in general. If they don't believe in it, it doesn't work. But if they believe it, it typically does work. So what you're seeing here with those two statements from both Ben Johnson and Jared Goff is that clearly the difference between Johnson's Goff, I'm talking about Johnson's Jared Goff, versus Sean McVay's Jared Goff, is there's a trust and a partnership between the two. McVay didn't believe in sharing any of the grandeur. He didn't believe in sharing how the offense was going to be ran or how the offense was going to be built. It was Sean McVay's offense, and that was the end of it. For Ben Johnson, he believed in sharing everything. He believed in sharing the success. He believed in sharing how the offense was built. He believed in sharing how the offense was ran, and that Jared Goff should be a full partner in that offense rather than just being the guy that got the plays and ran the offense like Sean McVay did. So that's 2022. There's a lot of stuff that went on in that season, that off season. But then we get to the 2023 offseason, which then includes what happened in the 2022 regular season. Now we get to the first time that Ben Johnson is truly actually put under a microscope and is really actually being sought after other teams to be a head coach. This is where the Lions, they made the massive accomplishment for their offense, because in that year, 2022, the Lions offense was the 5th best offense in the entirety of the NFL. Jared Goff had a fringe top 5 year as a quarterback. I've talked about it multiple times. You take a look at all of his stats, all of his statistical rankings, they were right there at number 5 or just outside number 5. Then you think about this. Because of all that success that the Lions had, because of all that success Jared Goff had, the offense had, the NFL as a result definitely took notice of Ben Johnson, and they were immediately drawn to him to become a potential head coach. And that's why he got a lot of attention in the 2022 offseason. He was interviewed by teams like the Colts, and he was interviewed by teams like the Texans, and he was almost interviewed by the Panthers. But at the last minute, Ben Johnson said, no, I don't want to go. I want to stay here. And he stayed with the Detroit Lions for yet another year. Now, here's the thing, though. What Ben Johnson stated in the 2023 offseason as the reasons as to why he considered to stay with the Detroit Lions rather than going to other teams was he stated the two reasons were loyalty to people that were already in the program, such as Dan Campbell, such as, the veteran players that were already there. And the second reason was the relationship he had with Jared Goff. Let's take a look at the loyalty aspect. You have to understand something here. Dan Campbell was the very first guy that really gave Ben Johnson a shot to be an offensive coordinator. He was the guy that said, listen, I trust you, I believe in you to be able to run the entire offense, and that was a huge thing for Ben Johnson, because again, if you go back and you take a look at Ben Johnson's coaching career, you go back and you take a look at what Ben Johnson had to endure to get to being an offensive coordinator. He went through a lot of dark days and a lot of dark periods. And for Dan Campbell to give him that first real shot to be a coordinator in the NFL, that meant that Ben Johnson wanted to express his loyalty to Dan Campbell that way. Then you take a look at the veteran players like Frank Ragnow and Taylor Decker. Those guys had been there longer than anybody else practically on the Lions roster at that time. And for Ben Johnson, he wanted to stay with those guys because now the Lions were starting to actually get something going. In 2022, they went 9-8. They were that close to making to the playoffs. So it's like, hey, we're starting to build something here. We're starting to move in the right direction. I don't want to abandon the ship when things are starting to go right. I want to stay with these guys because I want to see what we can go with it. And then you get to what I also would like to say, there's also kind of like a loyalty to the rest of the process, the fans, to everybody else in the city of Detroit, and to the Lions fans in general, because I'm going to say this right now. When it comes to the coordinators, Ben Johnson is definitely the more liked of the two between Aaron Glenn and himself. And there's a lot of Lions fans that have expressed a love for his creative and explosive offensive play calling. But then we get to the relationship that he has with Jared Goff. And as Johnson stated about Goff and his decision to return to the Lions for the 2023 season, this was a huge, huge thing that Ben Johnson said about it. He said he is one of the biggest reasons why I didn't want to leave. I feel we are tied together to a degree. He's an extension of me, and I'm an extension of him. That's huge. That is a massive statement coming from an offensive coordinator to his quarterback. Because you have to think about it here. Ben Johnson is in essence stating that, listen, the success that I have is related to him and his success is related to me. We are one and the same. That's huge. That right there tells me that Ben Johnson, again, was more about sharing and having a partnership with Jared Goff, wanting to work with Jared Goff rather than pretty much command and bully him around. That's huge. And when Jared Goff is pretty much one of the main reasons why an offensive coordinator comes back, you should definitely take notice of that. You should definitely store that away in your Rolodex somewhere and say, hey, this is a huge reason as to why this guy did not want to leave. So again, the relationship between those two men is not only important to Goff, but also to Ben Johnson. Because until very recently, I thought that was about the extent of it. But now I've really, like I said earlier on, this whole thing that's gone on with Jared Goff's contract and what Ben Johnson has said recently, I didn't really understand how seriously this relationship was between these two men. Let's get to where we are right now in the 2024 offseason. Now we get to yet a second time where Ben Johnson turns down even more opportunities to become a head coach, which prompts the all-important question that most every kid goes through that annoys their parents, the why question, the why face. Why did Ben Johnson decide to come back? Well, here's the thing. In 2023, what happens? Ben Johnson gets even more weapons to go into that season. He gets Gibbs. He gets David Montgomery in free agency. He gets he gets Sam Laporta. He gets all of these new weapons that he can put more stuff into this offense and get more things out of it. And what happens? The Lions go from finishing number 5 in 2022 to finishing number 3. They're the third best offense in the NFL. And Jared Goff, again, has a monumental season. He has one of the best seasons by a quarterback, not only in the NFL, but one of the best quarterback seasons as he's had in his career. So again, the entire offense, it is just humming along. It is just firing on all cylinders for most of the year. And Johnson, again, at the end of the season, he is now arguably not just one of the hottest candidates, he is arguably the most sought-after candidate to become a head coach now. And there are a lot of teams that want to get their hands on Ben Johnson. And we knew about it because there were so many times we were hearing about, oh, Ben Johnson's interviewing with this team. This team wants to interview Ben Johnson. This team wants to get a chance to talk to Ben Johnson. And everybody was freaking losing their minds thinking, oh, we're going to lose Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's not coming back. All these teams are gunning for him. They're going to go for him. And then what do we find out? Ben Johnson says, nope, I don't want to go. I want to stay here in Detroit yet again. And then everybody asks the all-important question. Why? But they're not asking it like, well, why did you not want to leave? Because we wanted you to leave. It's like, whew, we're glad you decided to stay. But what is keeping you here? Why do you want to stay here in Detroit rather than become the head man? That's an important question for a lot of people. And this is why the statement that Ben Johnson made, it reveals a huge, huge part of this relationship I'm talking about between Jared Goff and Ben Johnson. Johnson specifically stated when asked about the reasoning as to why he stayed in Detroit, he said, I'm not going to do it just to do it. And he's talking about taking a head coaching job. He says, I love what I'm doing right now. Love it. I love where I'm at. My family loves where we're at. Love the people that we're doing it with. So I'm not willing to go down the other path yet unless I feel really good about how it is going to unfold. Pretty much what Ben Johnson is stating there is huge, and it tells quite a lot. The first thing that it tells is that Ben Johnson is going to wait for the right opportunity. AKA, there have got to be several things in place before Ben Johnson is just going to bolt and jump ship. There has to be a solid roster for the most part. There better be a damn good QB. There has to be good management like what the Lions have, and there has to be good ownership like what the Lions have right now. Imagine trying to say that a couple of years ago about the Lions. But that right there, Ben Johnson has seen what the Lions have been able to do over the last couple of years. He's not just going to want to leave that and to go to some freaking crappy franchise and try and start all over when he's got nothing to work with. Ben Johnson is pretty much saying this: I'm not going to just all of a sudden leave the Detroit Lions just so that way I can become a head coach. It's got to be the right opportunity. It has to have the right set of circumstances for me to want to leave. Which, let me tell you something, to try to get all of those lined up in the same season, the same team that you're trying to go to, you're going to be waiting for a while. But then, the second thing is that Ben Johnson, he has more desire to remain in Detroit than to be the lead man, to be the head coach. And that, again, prompts the question of why. That prompted the question that I kept asking myself for several days. What is realistically keeping Ben Johnson here? And for me, I came down to 3 reasons. The first reason is family needs are most important. I can say this right now. As a father myself, as a dad myself, your family takes precedence over what you might want to do personally. Now, I'm not saying that Ben Johnson personally wants to go out and become a head coach, but as a father, as a dad, you want to make sure your family is taken care of. Well, think about this. Ben Johnson has 2 little ones at home. He has a 5 and a 7-year-old at the very least. Well, here's the thing. If you go back through Ben Johnson's family, you go back through his history, that's also explained in that article that I'm pulling all this from, there was a time where he didn't have a job for a long period of time. There was a time where he wasn't making any sort of money as a coach, and he thought about very seriously about quitting. It wasn't until I hate to say this, but this is the truth. It wasn't until Matt Patricia and Darrell Bevell decided to give him a shot that he actually got in with the Detroit Lions. And then once Matt Patricia got fired, Dan Campbell decided to make him the tight ends coach, and then the rest is history from there. So you have to think about it. Ben Johnson has seen what it's like to not have job security. He's not all of a sudden going to just want to throw that out the window just because, hey, I'm not going to get a shot to be the head man. And we're going to talk about why here in a moment. But you have to think about it. What's the other reason? The other reason, not to talk about the family reasons and to talk about the past experiences, which are 2 reasons kind of put together into one, but the third reason is Jared Goff. Let's call for what it is. Goff is the main driving force for how this offense runs. And without Jared Goff, this offense does not run the same way. And as we have seen throughout the last couple of years that I have demonstrated, Ben Johnson shares a very extremely freaking strong, damn strong relationship with Jared Goff. And you have to think about it. This 4-year extension that Jared Goff just got, this is why I'm talking about this extension is really, really important. I didn't really know how important it was, but until now. Think about it. Ben Johnson said that he's willing to wait until the right opportunity. Well, here's the thing. Like I asked this question earlier, but now I'm going to ask it a little bit more pointedly. What if the main reason Johnson won't leave is mostly because of Jared Goff? Think about it. It's hard enough as it is to try and find a good quarterback in the NFL. It's hard enough as it is to find a winning roster, to have a winning program, because you have to develop that. You have to build that. And that also works with having a good management team. But then you have to think about it. Jared Goff is arguably a top 5, top 10 quarterback. I don't care what the slappies that want to call themselves haters or doubters of Jared Goff want to say. Jared Goff is a top 5, top 10 quarterback. You can all just go and just decide if you don't want to believe that. You can all bury your heads in the sands like ostriches. The point of the matter is, that's the truth. Well, here's the thing. Johnson said that unless he felt really good about a situation, he is staying put. Well, think about it here. Jared Goff signed an extension for 4 years plus the 1 year he's already got. He's going to be here for the next 5 years. So I would say this. If Jared Goff is going to be here for the next 5 years, it would have to be a pretty damn good situation indeed for him to want to leave, because it's like, hey, the Lions have one of the youngest and best rosters in the NFL in terms of talent over the last couple of drafts. Jared Goff just signed a 4-year extension. He's going to be here for the next 5 years at a minimum. So think about it. Why would Ben Johnson want to leave? Why would Ben Johnson want to take all that he's got and he's developed and built here, especially after getting to the Super Bowl almost that close? He was 1 game away. Why would Ben Johnson want to leave that? That's why I'm saying that 4-year extension that Jared Goff got, I think, is more huge and more important than anybody wants to give it credit for. Plus, you have to think about this. You have to finish this thought here really quickly. Campbell and Goff have both stated in times past about not being surprised when Ben Johnson came back. Well, what if the same is true on the other hand? Everyone knew that Holmes and the Lions were trying to bring back the core pieces of their offense on extensions, whether it was Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, or Jared Goff. Well, think about it this way. What if Ben Johnson already knew that Jared Goff was going to get an extension? People inside that building talk to one another. It's not like they don't. And I'm pretty confident Jared Goff and Ben Johnson, they talk all the time. I'm pretty confident that Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson talk. What if Ben Johnson already knew that Jared Goff was going to get an extension? He just didn't know when it was going to happen. And that was a main driving force as to why he decided he wasn't going to leave. That's a rather big, important thing in my thought process here, because it's like, hey, if he highly suspected that right there again, to me, asks the question, it asks me this whole important thought process. Maybe the reason why Ben Johnson didn't leave is because he didn't want to be separated from his quarterback in Jared Goff. And then finally, just to wrap this whole thing up, just to give you guys a little thought process to kind of nibble on before I leave, let's first and foremost consider how little new coaches over the last, 15, 20 years have gotten in terms of their time to prove their worthiness in the NFL. There used to be a time in the old days that coaches would get a lot longer to try and prove themselves to be good coaches. But nowadays, most coaches don't get that luxury. Think about this. I can list you 11 names right now where guys literally got 1 year or maybe 2 before they were gone. Art Shell, fired by the Raiders after 1 season. Cam Cameron fired 1 year by the Dolphins. Lane Kiffin was fired literally only 18, 20 games after he got started. He finished 1 year and then was fired promptly very early into the next year. Jim Moore was fired 1 year after with the Seahawks. Marty Schottenheimer was fired 1 year after being with the Redskins in 2001. Eric Mangini was fired after 2 years with the Browns. Rod Jasinski was fired after 1 year with the Browns. Mike Mularkey was fired 1 year after being with the Jaguars. Urban Meyer, not even 1 year after being with the Jaguars. Lovie Smith, 1 year after being with the Texans. Chip Kelly, 1 year after being with the 49ers. If I'm Ben Johnson, I'm looking at that. It's like, listen, I want to make sure that the situation I'm running into, that I'm deciding to become a new head coach for, that it's going to give me the best chance for success. I don't want to just become a head coach to say because I'm a head coach. I want to be able to have sustained success and be able to say, listen, I've earned this position. I know what the hell I'm doing. That way I don't become one of those 11 names I just listed where I instantly get fired after a year or two and then nobody wants to touch me because, we gave you your shot and you pretty much crapped to bed. That's what I think Ben Johnson's trying to state here with that whole statement. Number one, because of the fact that he has all the pieces in Jared Goff here in Detroit, he's not wanting to leave that because he has a great relationship with Jared Goff. He has a great offense here with all the pieces that he has with Jared Goff and all the other stuff. You freaking Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, the offensive line, Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has all that. But he also does not want to jeopardize his long-term career in the NFL based upon all these other guys that had their shots and then pretty much think about it. Most of those other guys, after they got their shot or after they got that shot, they were pretty much done. The only guy that I can think of after that, off that list, that pretty much got another shot after they were done was Marty Schottenheimer. The rest of those guys, they either became coordinators or position coaches. They kind of faded into obscurity. My whole point is this. The relationship, the dynamic that Jared Goff and Ben Johnson have, I'm telling you this right now. Like I said, that contract extension that the Lions gave Jared Goff, I think has much more to it than meets the eye. And I think it's a huge reason as to why Ben Johnson decided not to leave. But anyway, I decided to make this episode. It's very detailed. It has a lot of stuff that goes into it, a lot of questions to think about, a lot of questions to answer. But this is why I think that Ben Johnson ultimately decided to stay. But having said that, I'm going to end the episode and say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, I highly encourage y'all to make sure that you please subscribe. But I also encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon at the bottom of the page so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. I also encourage y'all, please just share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the content. I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you all got something that makes you happy, makes you smile. And with that, I just want to say God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the very next episode.